25 years ago today, O.J. Simpson took off.
Being pursued by police.
Accused of a capital crime.
Not guilty of killing his ex-wife.
Murder suspect and fugitive.
Orenthal James Simpson, not guilty of the crime of murder.
In what's been called the trial of the century.
I've never seen so much evidence.
A character out of Shakespeare.
If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
Did O.J. Simpson murder his wife, or was it just another incident where the notorious Los Angeles Police Department was trying to incriminate another black man? But white protesters would say differently after the verdict came out. Discriminating and racist police would be blamed for the trials. Which side was right?
O.J. was the first overall pick in the 1969 NFL Draft by the Buffalo Bills. His career didn't start out that good throughout his first 3 seasons, but once Lou Saban took the reign, he gave him the ball as much as possible. O.J. played for 11 seasons, 9 for the Bills and the last 2 in San Francisco, playing for the 49ers. Throughout his career, he had a total of 11,236 rushing yards, as well as 2,142 receiving yards from 203 pass receptions. He scored a combined 76 touchdowns in his career. He had 5 All-Pro selections and 4 rushing titles. He also played in 6 Pro Bowls and won the NFL Player Award in 1972, 1973, and 1976. O.J. was also inducted into both the College and Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Nicole Brown Simpson was married to O.J. for 7 years from 1985 to 1992. Nicole filed for divorce after years of domestic abuse from O.J., which eventually led to the night of the murder. June 12, 1994, 8 p.m. Nicole Brown leaves a restaurant that her and her children were eating at. 10:15 p.m. While watching television, Pablo Fenfez, a neighbor of Nicole Brown Simpson, hears the barks of a dog. 10:25. Alan Park, O.J.'s limo driver, arrives at the Simpson residence. 10:55. Park calls his boss and tells him O.J. is not home, but his boss says to wait 15 more minutes. O.J. is always late. At 11 p.m., Park sees a black man about 6 feet, 200 pounds, walking across the driveway. O.J. Simpson is 6'1", 212 pounds. About 11 p.m., Simpson answers the intercom after Park buzzes. He claims he has overslept. 11:15, limo leaves for LA Airport. 12:10, the bodies of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman are found. 5 a.m., Mark Fearman arrives at the crime scene. Early on in his case, the prosecution figured that the murders must have happened around 10:15, right when Pablo Fenfez, a neighbor of Nicole, heard dogs barking. Although later in the trial, defense brought their own case witness to stand. Robert Heedstra claimed to hear the dogs barking at 10:35 p.m.
You heard this Akita start to bark?
Oh yeah, hysterically, panicking.
And you heard that at about 10:35?
10:35, well.
Simpson's court date was formally arranged for July 22, 1994, with Judge Lance Ito as the designated judge for the next 133 days until the trial concluded. We should assume O.J. is innocent until further evidence comes to light. We should take into account DNA evidence. Evidence shown by the prosecution included a genetic match between Simpson's blood and the blood found at the crime scene. To follow up, blood was found matching Ronald Goldman and Nicole Brown Simpson in O.J.'s Ford Bronco. Defense team says that either the DNA evidence was mishandled or most likely placed there by the Los Angeles Police Department. Robert Shapiro of the defense says the placement of the blood by the Los Angeles Police Department was motivated by race. Bob accuses Detective Mark Furman for these actions. An interview with Jeffrey Toobin, a lawyer covering the case, stated, quote, "It's monstrous if you're accusing a cop of trying to frame someone with murder and he didn't do it. Now, of course, the question was, did he do it? And that was played out throughout the trial. But it's certainly a monstrous allegation if there's no basis for it." Jeffrey remarks the trial would have been flipped upside down if the jury was mostly white. He noted that he believes because the jury in O.J. was African American that he is a free man. This is backed up by lawyer Marcia Clark, a main key to the prosecution. Marcia thought of O.J. as an evil man, quote, "He beat his wife, he's evil, and, to me, one of the biggest silver linings of the Simpson trial is the advances we've made in understanding domestic violence as a lethal problem. Before the trial, I think there was a widespread sense that it was a family affair, a normal part of every relationship, not really a crime. The reality is it's very much a crime. It's a very serious one. After the trial, Marcia quit her job she loved so much. She remarks, "I love my job," and then the Simpson case happened. Defense could not contend with Marcia's cunning side except for Robert Kardashian, OJ's friend and defense attorney. Robert stuck to the key notes of the defense, with OJ being set up by quote-unquote racist Los Angeles Police Department. He referenced to the racist Fearman tapes. Fearman quotes, "They do absolutely no good, they are a cancer society," and "no blood mark, just body shots," referring to African Americans. Robert brings up a point that shifts the jury's beliefs. The tapes also show more incredibly racist comments remarking racial slurs over 40 times and death threats. The tapes backed up accusations of Los Angeles Police Department framing Simpson.
Doctor, was there any finding made by you which in your opinion would have prevented him from murdering two human beings using a single-edged knife on June 12th of 1994?
Objection. Overruled.
You may answer the question, Doctor.
No, there was not.
At the address of the murders in Los Angeles on June 12th, 2 leather gloves were found soaked in blood from allegedly Nicole Brown or Ronald Goldman, or even both. Prosecution found out about the gloves and jumped on it immediately. They sought this out to be enough to put OJ away, but were mistaken. When the gloves were brought in, they were dry and firm. Simpson tried on the gloves and said, "Too tight." OJ continued to struggle with putting the gloves on. When they were on, OJ was limited with hand movement. This was enough for the jury to completely deny the evidence. The prosecution's fault was not pushing the evidence farther. You see, when leather comes into contact with liquid and has time to dry, it shrinks significantly. Matter of fact, the prosecution team did push with this evidence, but they had no way to prove this actually happened with the suspected gloves. Pure luck on OJ's behalf. This ended up being a home run for the defense team, since this could have been incredibly incriminating. After the trial, the jury was blamed for being biased again. The Los Angeles Police Department had a history of planting evidence. They would plant evidence that a crime was committed when they knew the suspect was guilty, just to make sure they got convicted. So yes, the defense's argument had some truth to it, but does this argument offset all the other evidence against him? After 8 long months, the jury went to discuss the verdict, and a discussion that should have taken days only took 4 short hours. The jury came back and found O.J. Simpson not guilty of all charges filed against him. With all this evidence, including DNA evidence, prior aggressions against Nicole Brown, witness testimonies including Alan Park's testimony about seeing a figure run across the driveway with about O.J.'s stature, and blood evidence on O.J.'s car, it seemed the only good piece of evidence the defense had was the glove, and the racist Los Angeles Police Department could have planted all the evidence. The prosecution tried to say the glove had most likely shrunk to blood soaking into the fibers of the glove, thus shrinking it. Then the defense had the point of saying the racist Los Angeles Police Department was trying to frame another black man, and the defense was able to make the jury feed it to this point mostly through the Furman tapes, which were 13 hours of complete racism. No way around it. The jury felt the emotional side of the case the defense was trying to play into with the race card, and it worked. Simpson got off clean, but there was one thing that was never brought forth to the jury. Kind of. Shortly after O.J.'s arrest, he had a friend and a former NFL defensive tackle turned Christian minister, Rosie Grier, come visit him. Simpson and Grier talked in a one-man visitation room with a thick glass pane separating them from the desk of Police Sergeant Jeffrey Stewart, whose back was turned away from them. When it is a normal conversation, the glass is pretty thick and you can't hear anything, Stewart remarked. Stewart then claimed to have heard Simpson slamming the phone down and saying, "I didn't mean to do it, I'm sorry." Stewart then recalled Grier saying, "OJ, you gotta come clean. You gotta tell somebody." Stewart's statement then was sealed before making it to Judge Ito. So Stewart testified, but was not allowed to say what he heard. He was only allowed to say that he heard something because under the state of law, conversation between inmate and clergy is to remain private. Could the statement have changed the case? Most likely it would have. If this evidence had been able to come to light in the trial, maybe the jury would have seen this as enough evidence to find Simpson guilty. But at the end of the day, Simpson was acquitted, and the topic still remains the most debated court case of the 20th century. Did O.J. Simpson commit the crimes he was charged with? We may never know for sure.